Hello and welcome. My name is Kaylin North. This is the first video of our Module 25. This is for Unit 1, Activity 2. Today we're going to be discussing language. What is it? I'm going to be discussing three key terms today and their definitions: language, language learning, and language teaching. I'll be going over my personal definitions for each of these terms, as well as the actual definitions for each of these terms. Lastly, I will be discussing and talking about some of the key points and differences that I found during our group session or group discussion during our last class. Let's look at our first key word, language. By definition, language is a system of conventional spoken, manually signed, or written symbols by means of which human beings, as members of a social group and participants in its culture, express themselves. The functions of language include communication, the expression of identity, play, imaginative expression, and emotional release. When first presented with the question of what is the definition of language, I definitely thought directly of communication. I believe that language can include all of the different types of communication, including verbal, nonverbal, signing, writing, pictures, drawing, etc. I do believe that language is meant to express our emotions, our knowledge, and our opinions of things, and be able to communicate those emotions, knowledge, and opinions to other people. I do believe that language is not something that only human beings express, but also animals. We can see this with cats and dogs and birds through a series of different sounds, actions, and smells. Animals are able to communicate with each other. And I think this is really important to look at when you are looking at children learning languages. Our next term is language learning. Now, by definition, language learning is the learning and use of a language. This can include acquisition, the cognitive process of acquiring skill or knowledge, or audiolingual acquisition, the system of language acquisition, focusing intensely on listening and speaking. When I think of the definition of language learning, this obviously is the process of learning a language. I believe language learning includes first, second, third, fourth, fifth languages and can consist of both in-class learning as well as in-home learning. We look at language learning as an infant in the home, where a child learns what hot or cold is just by experiencing for themselves the feelings that they have. And you see language learning in the classroom, where students are learning not only their native language, but also second languages. I believe that language learning can include a number of learning practices and activities, and really describes how a person learns to use either a first or second language. The definition of language learning brings us to our last key term, which is language teaching. Now, by definition, language teaching is teaching people to speak and understand a foreign language, teaching, pedagogy, instruction, and things like that. Personally, I think that language teaching is not only a foreign language, but also a native language as well. I think this is more of the way that an instructor teaches a language. This can include both grammatical teaching, immersion teaching, and in-class interaction. I think of language teaching as something that needs to require all different uses of learning styles, including audio, visual, and kinesthetic learning. When I hear the word language teaching, I think that's what I do. That's my job. And when I think of what my job is, it is how best to help my students to understand how to communicate in a specific language, and what can I do in order to have them help them succeed in that. We discussed as a group during class these three key terms, and I did find that our breakout group had a lot of agreements in the personal definitions between our group members. Most of us are already language teachers in the classroom and have a lot of experience with the difficulties and the successes of teaching a language. I would say a big difference was before the talk with the group, I was a little unclear on the differences between language acquisition and language learning. And through our discussions, I was able to grasp a better understanding of what each of those meant and the differences. I saw that the meaning of language had a lean toward expression um, versus only speaking. So I was happy to see that many of us were able to include expression as being a primary source of what language is. Language teaching or learning is not only in the classroom, but in home as well. Through our group discussions and reading the literatures, I see more now how keeping a home language or a native language involved in your language teaching and learning is so important. All in all, I found this activity to be very enlightening, including the group discussions and the literature that we were provided to be able to read. I look forward to looking more into the differences of these definitions and how I can better use the knowledge of these definitions and the similarities and the differences in my own classroom teaching. The following is a reference page in APA format for the PowerPoint slides previously shown.